Hi, I'm Dr. Zoe, and I'm so glad you're here today. I usually don't do updates or beginning things when I do podcasts where I have somebody else on as a guest, but I'm going to try to change that. Today, I have a guest, Latoya Mathews, and I'm very excited to share her story with you today because it's a universal story in that it deals with shame and guilt and how shame and guilt affects us and our life if we don't resolve it. And it's a specific story about the shame and guilt that she had over an abortion that she had when she was a teenager. Now, the interesting thing about this episode is that we lost connection. We had a really bad time with the internet for some reason. And so we had to stop it. And we recorded half on one day and half on a different day. And so the second day, I'm wearing the same clothes for continuity. I thought it would help. I don't know if she's going to be because we're getting ready to get on now. But so for the second day, you're going to see my hair looks a little different. She might look totally different. And we just kind of cut the episode and started again. So that's why you're going to see the wardrobe change. So listen in. I think that you will be blessed by hearing her story. And I think that you can also attribute it to your own story. And I hope that it's a step towards your own healing. Latoya, I'm so glad to have you on today. I'm laughing because this is the second time we're doing this. Hopefully, this one will work. We had a little bit of some internet difficulties, but I'm thrilled to have you on this podcast because I know that your story and essentially your healing is going to really be a blessing for so many women.
Dr. Zoe, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here and to be able to share with your community. Thank you.
You're welcome. So before we get started, can you share your win and your fail?
Yes. So I thought about this question a lot. And so it's kind of like a fail and a win at the same time. In my current position, I am faced with a lot of changes that happen nearly on a daily, weekly basis. And so I have to ask for help. I have to surrender to the thought that I don't know everything. And that has been kind of like the fail. But the win is being in this position has helped me come to the realization that I don't know everything. And I was trying to push away from this position. It was like, man, I don't like this position. Why don't I like to work? Because I know that I like to work. But I had the realization that I like to work when I know what I'm doing. But in this position, I have been faced with insecurities of not knowing everything and having to depend on people and ask for help. And so that, having that realization helped me to just kind of surrender to the process of my position and being able to look at it in a different way.
That's beautiful. So you were hating your job,
Yes.
but because you felt insecure, your job made you feel insecure.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's so many people. I've had this experience too, where I will hate something and I don't take the time to ask myself, what is it about it that I'm hating?
Exactly.
And so that is a win for you because you were able to look at it and figure it out and go, oh, wait, this is actually a place where I can grow.
Exactly.
And it
Exactly.
shifted your lens, right? Now you
Yes.
look at your work differently.
I really do. I really do. It was just such an eye opener. It was just like,
Mm,
man, so this is what is happening. Instead of flow, I'm trying to force something. And instead
right.
of facing those insecurities, I was trying to run from them.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to dive into your story. You know, the work that I do, I get to see really these windows inside of people's lives that I recognize. I really feel an honor. I feel a sense of honor to be able to walk in those places because even your friends, your family members, they're not sitting on your couch and telling you all the deep, dark things, right?
Right.
And so I get to see that in my work. And so hearing people's stories, it doesn't necessarily have the same effect on me as I know it does other people because they don't get to hear these stories on a regular basis. And often we'll have experiences where we feel like, oh, it's just me. I'm the only person that has this.
Exactly.
I'm the worst person in the world. And so I want to share your story for women out there who do have shame and guilt regarding their own story. So thank you for coming on today. Can you start us out by telling us about your story?
Yes. So it started back in 2003. I was 18 years old and I had just graduated high school, getting ready for college. Choosing between scholarships with tennis and basketball. It was just like
Wow.
so much, that was happening for me. And I found myself sitting in our health department, and the nurse told me, "You're pregnant." And it was like, what? Me being, the 18-year-old naive young lady that I was, it was just like,
Mhm.
how could this happen? And it was just like, she gave me a choice. And the crazy part was I had never even heard of abortion at that time.
Really?
And exactly, we had never had a conversation. I didn't even know the word existed. But I believe she gave me a pamphlet. And because I had so much going on, I was like, look, I don't want to um, raise a child on welfare. I, have my scholarships. I don't really have
Mhm.
a great relationship with my mom. So it was just like all these things that I made up in my head. And I was just like, you know what? I am going to make this decision. I'm not going to follow through. I'm going to, have this abortion. And so I found myself on the walk of shame, walking into that abortion clinic. The protesters standing outside, and I have my head hanging low because I'm like, I don't want anyone to see my face.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in there alone, filling out the paperwork. I lay on the table, and then they take me to a recovery room for about 10 minutes, to, let my body recover from the
Mhm.
procedure that had just happened. And then afterwards, I went school shopping for college.
Oh my goodness.
And I guess it was just kind of like a coping thing for
Mhm.
me to just take my mind off of that. And then, but it wasn't until that night I found myself sitting in the back bedroom of my cousin's house. And all of a sudden, it just seemed like the walls just came crashing down. Like I just began to cry. And
Mhm.
it was just like, what did I just do? And, I was feeling like, I didn't have a close relationship with God, but I knew God, but I didn't have
Mhm.
that close relationship. But it was just like, what did you just do? Like, how
Mhm.
could you? And from that night to about 10 years, up until 10 years, I prayed every night, God, please forgive me.
My goodness. You know, as you share that story, and especially hearing that here you were finding out you were pregnant at the very first time that you're also learning what abortion is.
Right.
That is huge because I mean, first of all, when we have big decisions, when we have really scary things happen to us, we can't even think straight. And then to have this information like, oh, here's this thing you can do. To a certain extent, you didn't have any real full realization of what you were getting ready to do.
Exactly.
Right. You just took the option because that
Yeah.
option seemed better. Wow. You mentioned that the people protesting outside of the abortion clinic. I got pregnant at 15. And when I went to an abortion clinic, I had been people who would protest outside of abortion clinics because I grew up in a very fundamental Christian home and with a knowledge from early on what abortion was and that it was wrong and that you were going to go to hell if you had an abortion. And yet I found myself, at 15 pregnant and going from marching in abortion clinics with my mom and dad to showing up at an abortion clinic
Wow.
myself. I ultimately did not go through with the abortion. I literally jumped off of the table.
Yeah.
Um, but my story is a whole different one of placing my daughter for adoption. And there's a whole nother thing of guilt and shame that goes along with that. So it just strikes me that I was on that other side and with full knowledge of what I had done and what I was getting ready to do. And you weren't. The interesting thing, and we'll hop back, but the interesting thing about shame is that we create, this story about who
Yes.
we are as a result of these things that are done. Um, and it's easy for people to say, oh, but that wasn't your fault. And, oh, you didn't know any better. But what happens with our brain is that we make decisions maybe we feel guilty about them. And guilt and shame, I'll just go ahead and talk about that. Guilt and shame are different because guilt says I did something and maybe I can
Right.
rectify it, right?
Yeah.
Shame says I am something bad. And so when I hear your story, okay, so you did something, you got pregnant, and then you did another thing, you had the abortion. And what happens is guilt that isn't dealt with or processed becomes shame. It
Yes.
just morphs into that because it kind of like it's like a plant, the roots take hold and then it becomes
Exactly.
who you are. Yes, instead of a thing that you did. So I can relate on some levels, and then on others I can't because I couldn't imagine finding out right then about abortion and then making the decision and then all the realization later that will come and that must have come for you. So tell us about that part.
Yes. Well, like I said, it was like 10 to 12 years that I dealt with, just made to feel, like you said, like I was a bad person,
Mm-hmm.
made to feel like I wasn't worth anything, didn't have any value. And it wasn't until I moved to Georgia and my now pastor, she introduced us to this book called The True Measure of a Woman by Lisa Bevere.
Mm-hmm.
And in chapter 2 of it, it is called Cleaning Out the Closets. And Lisa asked like two questions at the end of the book. And she was like, what is it that you need to clean out of your closet? And I knew like at that moment, because I just felt like I had been going through hell. Like I was ready to take my life. I was just ready to just end all the pain that I was feeling. And at that moment, that question was like an eye opener for me. It was like, okay, maybe God is now telling me that this is something that I need to clean out of my closet. And the
Mm-hmm.
second question was, what is it of value do you have to offer to other people? And I was sitting in my master bedroom on my bed and I just started bawling because I was like, I don't have anything of value to offer anyone. And
That was
then
your shame story.
that was my shame story. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, God, why would you create me if I had no purpose?
Mm. Wow.
And all of those feelings and emotions just rushed out of me. And it wasn't until we met again and I told her what I had written. And she said, well, sweetie, the very first time that you prayed, God forgave you. And no one had knew up until that moment. I had pain in my stomach. It was kind of like a reminder of what I had done. But in that moment when she said God forgave you the very first time that you prayed, I haven't had that pain in my stomach since, because it was just like shame had worked its way in me, and that in that way that unforgiveness was had taken a hold of me as a reminder of who I was, the decision that I made, and just to be truthful of who I already thought that I was.
Right. That was you not forgiving yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Brene Brown talks about shame. She talks about shame and guilt, but she describes or says that the antidote to shame is vulnerability. And I think that a great first step in dealing with shame is vulnerability because you have to be
Yes.
able to speak it first. You have to be able to confess, maybe, and at the very least speak, because sometimes shame is put upon us that is not in any way deserved. And sometimes we have guilt, maybe for something that we did do, but shame, I don't think shame is ever deserved because shame is about who you are as a person.
Right.
What we know is that we can all do things that don't align with our values, but that doesn't make us who we are. And that's something that we have to understand. And so by speaking the thing that you are so shameful of, it is a really great first step. But I believe that the antidote to shame is self-forgiveness.
Yes.
And that's what
Yes.
I'm hearing that you were able to get to. Now, before you get way on that journey 10 years later to
Mm-hmm.
self-forgiveness, what I've noticed about shame and guilt and what many women might be experiencing is that our shame, we co-sign with it, right? So we co-sign, we decide, yep, this is
Exactly.
who I am.
Yep.
And then as a result, we start making choices in our life based on that foundation of shame.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that in yourself?
I did, and it's what I like to call
Yes.
the side effects of that, right? Because now I had to get to know who I was outside of the shame and the guilt, rediscover, my identity, and to know of my own worth and value.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a lot of time, to do. And it was just like I would show up in rooms, like even networking events, and I would just sit in the corner because I'm like, I don't want anybody to know what I've done,
Wow.
knowing they don't know me from Adam, right?
Yeah.
But when you're in that mindset, when you're in that mindset, that's the way you think, because that's how shame will have you to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I would
Yeah.
find myself not talking, not, and it's like, why are you at the networking event if you're not going to network?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, shame prevented you from being able to do that because it
Yes,
also tells us the story of you're the only one. Nobody
exactly.
else has this problem.
Exactly.
Everyone's going to hate you. Everyone's going to think this about you. You're going to be ostracized if they only knew who you really
Exactly.
are. Yes,
Exactly.
yes. And that story keeps us from showing up in our careers,
Mhm.
keeps us from showing up in our relationships. I know for me, it definitely affected my marriage and the way that I interacted with my
Yes,
husband.
most definitely.
And it also affected my parenting because there was a part of me that felt like my parenting bone had been broken because I could give a child away. And
Right.
if I could do that, then maybe I couldn't really mother another child. Did you have that experience?
I did, and even it with my marriage, with my daughter now,
Mm-hmm.
adding on top of the things that were happening, I became pregnant again, not dealing with what I had already been through,
Mm-hmm.
and no one had ever talked to me about postpartum depression.
Mm.
And so I had my daughter, and my mom came to assist me, to take care of things while I recovered after having my
Mm-hmm.
daughter. And one day she was just crying, and my husband went out of town to visit my bonus son, and he's away. So she's crying. My mom holds her. She stops crying. But when I got her, she's just started crying. And I
Mm.
ran out to the car immediately. It's hot outside. I'm sitting in the car, windows up, and I'm bawling. And I call my husband, and he's like, "What's happening?" And I say, "She doesn't love me." And mind you,
Oh,
this is at 2 weeks old.
oh my goodness.
What 2 week old knows anything about love? That was the headspace that I was in. And it was like, how could I give her love when I didn't even have love myself?
Mm-hmm.
Outside of healing, that was like one of the hardest journeys to be on, parenting and healing at the same time.
That's a double doozy. And so many women walk that journey. So you might notice that we look a little different today. I have the same shirt on. I tried to for continuity, but my hair is different and you're differently dressed, Latoya.
Yes.
It's a different day. I happened to get new curtains in my office last night. So that looks differently too. We had some internet issues. So we stopped the recording and we're going to pick back up right now.
Right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you were sharing with me about really some of the consequences of how your shame story affected your life and your relationships
Yes.
and your beliefs about yourself as a mom, about your really about your deservedness, right? Of
Yes.
being a parent. And you were telling us about that time that your daughter was crying and what you
Yeah.
said to your husband. So you alluded a bit to postpartum depression. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about your experience with that?
Well, I didn't even know it was, postpartum depression at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was like years later that I was like, that's what I was dealing with on
Yes.
top of everything that I had went through pre-pregnancy. And it was just like, you know, it was just crazy just to think that in my mind, my daughter didn't love me,
Mm, yes.
you
But
know.
You know, what we know about postpartum depression is that it definitely is driven by hormone changes. It's driven by chemical imbalances. It does tend to, you do tend to be genetically loaded for it, but it's very hard for us to, I should say, almost never can we separate
Yeah.
our self-talk, our psyche, our lifestyle, our environment from things like postpartum depression,
Yeah.
anxiety. And so it's very common for women who have a shame story, especially when it comes to any aspect of mothering, fertility, themselves as mothers, to struggle with depression in that area
Yeah.
because, you know, you want so much to be the mother that you want to be. And it's the fear that drives the depression.
Exactly. And not only was I dealing with that, I had just lost my grandmother like a year before. So
Mm-hmm.
it was like so many things just piled up at once, and
Yeah,
the hormones after having my daughter was just like, you know, now that I look back, I'm just like, man, it was a lot to endure after, having a child, like having all that be piled up on me.
it is a lot to endure, but you got through it.
I
You
got through
did.
it.
And your daughter did.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that because that's really why we're here. How
Mhm.
did you overcome your shame story?
It was, I was getting ready to go to a conference, and
Mhm.
I just kept hearing in my spirit, like, it's time to tell your story.
Mm,
And I was like, well, I don't know about that, like maybe I'm hearing wrong, because I don't want the judgment, I don't want the opinions of other people, I'm not ready, for the ridicule, because it's like I never really heard anyone talk about this.
mhm.
And the voice just kept getting louder and louder, like, tell your story. And so I got up at this conference one day, and I, was like, how do you incorporate something so taboo into business? And the speaker was like, you just talk about it. And
Was
so
that Patrice Washington?
no, it
No.
was Rachel Luna at Confidence Activated.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's where I met Patrice Washington for the
Okay.
very first time.
I
And
heard you
so,
on her podcast. Yeah.
yes, I had the opportunity to speak there. And so I got up, shared my story. And then immediately after sharing a piece of my story, I ran out of the room because I was like, Latoya, what did you just do? Like, we don't do this. Like, you stepping all the way out of your comfort zone right now. And so,
Brene Brown calls that the vulnerability hangover.
yes.
Yes. It's
So
real.
I immediately left the room, and I was crying. I was like, what just
Mm,
happened? But after just hearing the women say, thank you for sharing, like, I too have
right.
had an abortion.
Yeah.
And I even had an opportunity to pray with someone, because she was like, I don't believe I'll be able to have children because I've had, an abortion. And so it was like at that moment, it's like, okay, like it was confirming and affirming for me. And the more I told my story, the more I, got up the courage to speak. It's just like every time I tell the story, it's like more chains are breaking off. Another level of freedom comes every time I get to tell the story. And so that's how I was able to overcome it, just by sharing and being vulnerable and, running out of that room and just hearing those women say, thank you so much.
Wow, that's so powerful. And that vulnerability is also so powerful. When we tell the story that we think other people will demonize us for, and we realize
Yes.
that, we've been holding it for so long, and then we realize that, wait, the world didn't fall apart. I just spoke those words and nothing happened,
Nothing
right?
happened.
No, and not only that, but beautiful things happened as a
Yes.
result. It is definitely healing. It is so
Yes.
healing. Like I said, I also believe that vulnerability is a first step. The
Hmm.
next step is forgiveness. And
Yes.
sometimes being vulnerable allows you to forgive yourself because you recognize that other people forgive you as well, that other people
Exactly.
aren't holding that, and holding you to, this punishment for the rest of your life that you think that you deserve.
Yes.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that.
And I
So,
always tell my clients, I'm sorry, I always
no,
tell my clients, I'm like, you're the one, holding on to that. So you have to be the one to let it go.
beautiful.
No one else can do that but you. And I think I found another level of freedom too by having the conversation with my daughter at 12. Because my husband
Mm.
was like, does she know exactly what you do? And I was like, I don't know. So we called her downstairs and I asked her if she knew what an abortion was, and just opened up the conversation for her. And she gave me what she thought it was, and then so I told her about a little bit about my story and what I had done, and her response was just like another level of freedom for me too. And she said, well, I'm glad you chose me.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
it brings tears to my eyes every time I'm
Yes.
gonna hold them in this time. But it was just like God's unconditional love flowed from her. And it was just
Wow.
like the water to my weary soul that I needed to hear at that moment. And that brought another level of freedom to know that even when I thought I was getting it wrong, like here she is telling me that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
That's beautiful. I had a similar experience when I shared with my children that they had a sister, because I didn't tell them about my history and the adoption
Right.
until they were older as well. I mean, when I say older, they were, I think, 11, 9, and 7, and then the baby didn't know what was going on. um, but when I told them, I had that same kind of freeing experience, because you do live, with all of these fears. So, speaking of freedom, can you tell us about your 5 pillars of freedom?
Yes, so I believe the 5 pillars of freedom, to get you to that place of freedom, is
Uh,
going to be the power of peace, releasing the burdens of the past, because without peace, you don't have power.
mm.
And so it's just really getting that power back by having peace in your mind and just releasing those things that are weighing you down.
So,
And
how do you
then
get the peace? You get the peace by releasing?
yeah, by releasing, by walking in that forgiveness, by,
Mm.
taking accountability for what you can do right now. Yes, it did happen to you, but what can you do right now to move forward?
That's beautiful. One of the things that I did after I started speaking, like, well, I shouldn't say speaking, after I spoke my truth, after I told my family and I told my kids, is I started changing my dialogue around my children. Because before that, people would say, how many children do you have? And I'd say, I have 4. And just this little switch of going, I have 5, and not feeling like I have
Mm,
to explain it, and not feeling like, is that the truth? Is that not the truth? Just being able to be confident and say that, that was my little piece of walking out
yes.
that part. Yeah.
Yes. And just like you said, owning your story,
Mm.
that's how peace comes, like
Mm.
this is just who I am. This is an event that happened in my life, is not who I am.
Beautiful. Yes.
And then we move into personal identity, just owning and embracing who you are, accepting the flaws and all, and knowing that I am imperfect and I'm not going to be perfect. I'm human, I'm going to make mistakes, but, I am who I am and I am a gift to the world.
Yeah. And, also that aspect of, I think when it comes to forgiveness, is we are often we are way harder on ourselves than anybody else is. But also remembering that if God could forgive us, why in the world would we not be able to forgive ourselves, right? Like, we're going to hold
Yes.
ourselves to some higher standard. How does that
Yes.
make any sense? And logically, there's this logical thing, and then there's this emotional thing. And we can spurt and say all the logics, not
Yeah.
your fault, God forgave you, you need to forgive yourself. But there has to become a place where you're able to connect with that emotionally. And that
Yes.
takes time,
It
and that
does.
takes a lot of deep diving. It's not something that just happens overnight. And so you want to look at this as a practice.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, I don't take affirmations lightly,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we just use affirmations as band-aids to kind of cover up what we really need to face. But I use them now in the space that I am in, because I know, at my core, like I've discovered who I am, and embracing those things that I once tried to get rid of and not claim, as who I am,
Mm-hmm.
but using affirmations to affirm that I am a gift. I am, you know, crowned with confidence, speaking those things into my life, because when you don't know, who you are, it's just so much easier to accept the lies that are being spoken, when it comes to that shame and defeat and other things.
Right. Okay, so there's 2 pillars so far.
2 pillars so far:
Okay.
power, peace, and personal identity. And
Okay.
then the third pillar is pattern breaking, breaking those patterns that have held you back.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those patterns for me was self-sabotage, showing up in those networking events, but standing in the back because I didn't want anyone to know what I had done.
Right.
And so, not knowing that some of those things that happen in our past, they dictate the way we move and the things that we do right now. And so just breaking those patterns.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think that that is actually the work that I do with women. Is they come to me because they are self-sabotaging. I see a lot of women right now, a lot of women in their 30s who have this story, single women who have this story that they're not worthy, no one will ever want to marry them. Um, it's too late for them. And then they go and show up in relationships with that lens, that energy, and they repeat the very same thing, or they don't, even put themselves out on a dating app. They've got all these excuses for why I can't,
Right.
date online, and they're sabotaging the very thing that they want. And it's because of that shame story, which often I find goes back to childhood
Yeah,
messages they got from their father, parents. Yes,
exactly.
it's a ripple effect. But
Yes.
yes, I love that one.
And that's why I tell my clients, like, sometimes that's why you shouldn't follow your heart. Because if your heart isn't
Yes, yes.
healed, you're going to go back to that same place. That's why you keep falling for the same guy. That's why you keep going through the same cycles, because you're following an unhealed heart.
Right. We confuse familiarity with attraction.
Yes.
And that's okay if what you're familiar with is really healthy. If what's familiar is not healthy, it gets you into trouble. Beautiful.
Exactly. Yes. And so many times we have learned to carry the hard things, not even realizing that they're heavy anymore. We're
Mm,
just accustomed to
right.
carrying them.
Right.
And so, just coming to that realization, coming to that awareness, hey, this is a pattern that I need to, work on in my life. And one thing that I always say, pattern breaking is kind of like cleaning your house.
Mm-hmm.
You may ask somebody, what did you do today? I cleaned my house. 9 times out of 10, you probably cleaned the kitchen or a room, but you
Right.
didn't clean the entire
Mhm.
house. And that's how we have to approach healing, one room at a time.
I love that. That's why I always say it's a practice. It's not and even forgiveness. So I want to talk about
Yes.
that in a minute, but let's go. We'll go to the next steps.
Yes. And so the fourth pillar is going to be permission to dream. You can live
Mm.
life and heal at the same time. Your dreams don't have to stop, because I believe that when you do come forth with your dreams, when you do the things that you love, that brings healing as well.
It
So
does.
don't stop dreaming just because you had this event that happened to you, or you've been through the trauma. I believe that the traumatic experiences that we've experienced gives us a second chance at life. It
It
gives
does.
us a second chance to really truly live the life that we deserve or we're meant to have. And so don't stop dreaming. Give yourself permission to step into the things that people told you that you weren't meant to do, or you were incapable of doing it. That's going to bring healing for you as well. So the two doesn't have to be exclusive.
Right, right. Yeah, often that thing that is the hardest in our life is the very key to our purpose. And don't stop dreaming, and also take action towards that dream.
Yes,
It's okay to
exactly.
do that now.
It's
Yeah.
okay. It's
Oh,
okay. And the fifth pillar is practicing healthy habits. There's this proverb that I love. It says, bad habits are like a comfortable bed, easy to get into, but hard to get out of.
I wish that weren't true, but it's so true.
Just finding those habits and practicing healthy habits that get you to the life that you envisioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe that those five things together gets us to the freedom to really, show up, to release the judgment, to resist the confinements of societal and religious standards, just
Mm-hmm.
releasing yourself. So I believe those five things are what it takes to get to the freedom that we truly desire.
I love that. Those are excellent pillars. Those are excellent pillars. Those are beautiful steps that women can walk. And, you know, I think, well, I just want to say, because you brought it up, and then I want to go to forgiveness, is you didn't feel like you had a close relationship with God in the very beginning of all this. Um, and so maybe a lot of your shame and guilt was societal. Maybe it was just what you did understand or know about
Right.
God. But I have found the religious community, the Christian community, to sometimes be the most shaming and judging. And I don't believe that that was Jesus. We can see in the Bible that I can't think of
Exactly.
one example where he shamed anyone.
Yes.
But shame is this thing that it's a natural part of humanity. It's a natural part of our psyche, and actually beneficial to a certain extent for society, for being able to go along with rules and for us not to have chaos. But it's poisonous when it
Right.
passes a threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of our institutions take advantage of that shame. We use it because it's a really powerful tool, and we
Yeah.
use it for manipulation. And so many women get hurt
Exactly.
and religious, environments because of shame. And so if you're a woman out there listening and you feel that sense of shame and you feel that it is deserved, I'm just going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to maybe go deeper into the Bible, go deeper into your understanding or your just read and understand more than what you've just been told about yourself.
Yes.
Come to the conclusion yourself and think about your relationship with God as an individual relationship. Because when it comes to hiding, and here's the thing that gets me, we hide from humans. Right. So
Yes.
so we do something that we're shameful about, or we're told that who we are as a person is a shameful thing. And we want to hide from humans the things that we've done or the people we are. But if God knows everything, what are we hiding?
Come
Right.
on. Yes.
So that hiding part is not about your religion. That's about humans. And
Yes.
that's the thing that you got to let go. You've got to let go. God
Yes.
already knows. You have your own relationship with God. You got to let go of the human part that puts the shame on you.
Exactly. And one of the things that and I hope this helps someone else, but one of the things that I would pray was, God, give me eyes to see myself as you see me.
Beautiful.
Because of my shame story, it was like, I don't see myself in this word. I don't see myself in the Bible because, of what I've done, the decision that I chose to make. Is just like, God, give me eyes to see myself. And
Mhm.
just like you said, when we're in that mindset or that mind frame, is like we think we're hiding from God, but the Bible tells us there's nowhere you can go that you can
No,
hide. And
right.
even in darkness is light to God. And
Mhm.
so he knows all, he sees all. And our relationship with God is primarily based on how our relationships with people. We based it on our relationship with people. So it's like, if people will judge me, then God will judge me too.
Mhm.
And so now I'm in the space where, now as I continue to tell my story, and it's like, well, are you worried about what people will say? And it's like, you can't tell me anything that I haven't already said about myself. You
Mhm.
can't tell me anything that I haven't already thought about myself,
Mhm.
because this is what brought me to another level of freedom. When, just like you said before, if God has forgiven me, why am I holding it over my head?
Right. Right. That's a human thing that we've got to let go of.
Let
Yes.
go. Yes.
Beautiful. So I just want to hear, because I love to hear different people's definition of forgiveness. What is forgiveness to you?
Forgiveness for me is like a gift.
Mm.
And I say a gift because it is given without ulterior motives. It's not given out of a requirement, but forgiveness is a gift. And when I receive a gift, I don't just leave it under the tree. I don't just leave it on the island. I take that gift and I open it.
Mm.
And for me, forgiveness is a gift that I want to open so that I can be able to experience life, be able to experience joy and happiness, being able to release myself from the power of other people.
So it's a gift we're given to ourselves.
Gift, yes,
Yeah. When we forgive ourselves, it's a
exactly.
gift. I think when we forgive other people, we're doing the same thing. But
Yeah.
when we forgive ourselves, it's a gift. I'll drop something that we're giving to ourselves.
Yes. And just releasing. Forgiveness for me is just releasing, parting ways with it, not picking it back up, not dwelling on what happened, but truly releasing it releasing it and giving myself permission to live my life.
That's beautiful. And once again, even with forgiveness, I just want to encourage that person listening. It's a practice.
It is a practice.
Yes, it's not a one and done. And I think that a lot of times forgiveness is put out there as like, oh, you just need to forgive yourself and then boom, you're done for the
Yeah,
no,
no.
because there's so many little things that come up. There's triggers that come up. There's things that set us
Exactly.
back. And forgiveness has to be a constant practice that we are doing for ourselves
Exactly.
as a gift.
And that's why I kind of have a problem with the 21 day. They say you
Mm,
do something for 21 days and you will see a change. But if you practice unforgiveness for 10 years, you're not going to break that in 21 days.
right, right.
And this is why we fall back into patterns and, different things, because we have this expectation that I'm going to do it in 21 days, but you're still breaking the cycles that you've practiced and perfected over years.
And we're not paying attention to the constant barrage of things that shame us or make us feel bad or
Exactly.
triggers that will bring it back up. Yes,
Because life is going to happen.
it will. Yeah.
And you're gonna beat yourself up and not give yourself grace for not following through, but not knowing, hey, these things are things that you've built over time, and now you're trying to deconstruct this in 21 days, and that's just not realistic for people that have been in our headspace of having that shame story.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So, a woman listening, if you've started and you felt like you did forgive yourself, and then you find out you're in another place where you realize, wait, I have to forgive myself for this, or I'm not feeling this, that's exactly the process. You fall down and you get back up. You forgive
Yes,
yourself, you keep going, you fall down, get back up, forgive
that's
yourself,
it.
keep going.
Repeat.
Repeat, repeat. Yes. Latoya, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being brave enough to share your story, for your gift that you're giving both yourself and other women. Do you have
Yes.
one last thing to say to a woman who might be still sitting in her shame story, hasn't told anybody, is feeling that kind of pull and going, oh, that's me?
I would encourage you to ask God for courage so that you can reach out. My DMs are always open. So if you
Mm.
ever, want to share, just send me a DM. But the thing is, don't continue to sit on your island of isolation. It's time for you to know what it feels like to thrive. It's time for you to know what that joy and that happiness feels like. And it doesn't matter. Your situation doesn't matter. The choice that you made, it doesn't matter. You deserve that. You deserve
Beautiful.
it.
Thank you. So how can women get a hold of you?
You can follow me on Instagram at the Latoya Mathews, and Mathews is just one T, not two, just one. And you can go to my website, latoyamathews.com, as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I just want to also just throwing this out there for any woman, if you're still in that space, I just want you to know we're having a retreat in September,
Oh,
September 23rd through the 25th. And it's not just for post-abortive women. I have women from all walks of life, because I just want you to know you may not have had a physical abortion, but you've had things in your life that have tried to abort your destiny. And so just come, release, reconnect, replenish, and be restored.
is this a virtual or in-person event?
It's in person.
Where is it?
It's going to be in Atlanta, Georgia, North Atlanta, at a private location. And so I'm just really excited about it. The women are excited, and I'm just
Mm.
excited to see what takes place, because it's just something I can't explain. Just so much freedom that takes place, while being there.
Wow, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.